Angie Thomas, the author of The Hate You Give, once said, quote, "Books and film adaptations are like fraternal twins in a parent trap situation. They're raised by two different parents," unquote. And I definitely agree with that. But when an adaptation completely falls apart, I fear that we can't just blame different mediums. Sometimes it's deliberate choices. And today we're going to be talking about a book adaptation that had so much potential. Hi, my name is Jules DeVore. I'm an acting major, casting minor with training in producing at SCAD, and I want to specialize in book adaptations. One of my favorite reads of last year was The Housemaid by Freida McFadden. I was so excited for this movie because the trailer was so good, and that's rare these days. But y'all, I walked out of that theater so disappointed. And I wasn't alone. Even people who hadn't read the book were split on whether it worked or not. That being said, it was a fun theater experience. The theater I went with Jasmine. We went to a 10 p.m. showing. It was basically all women. There were cheering, there were booing, there was laughing. The audience brought the vibe. The movie, not so much. So let's break down what went wrong. Okay, I forgot to explain this before I went into what I didn't like about it. The Housemaid is about this girl named Millie who used to be incarcerated for unknown reasons for 10 years. She gets out of prison, she needs a job, and she interviews to be the housemaid at this rich lady, Nina's house. And it's a beautiful house, everything seems perfect, but then Nina's kind of batshit. She's like, what's wrong with her? She has a daughter named Cece that she had with a different man. Her husband's name is Andrew, and he's like, perfect, and like Millie's making eyes at him. And then there's a gardener named Enzo who's like communicating to Millie to get out. That's basically it. If you didn't see Housemaid, that's what you missed. And here's what you missed on Glee. Oh, what else? Oh, trigger warning. I'll talk about abuse in this story, child abuse. And if that's not something you're comfortable with, I'll see you in the next one. But yeah, enjoy. Let's start with something that can make or break an adaptation. Casting. Casting was announced in late 2024, handled by Allison Jones, who, by the way, is incredible. Like, someone I look up to so much. She casts things like Don't Worry, Darling, Barbie, to name a couple. And just to be clear, casting decisions don't fall solely on the casting director. Final say is given to the director and the producer. So when you're casting something like The Housemaid, you're balancing A, a built-in audience from the book, and then B, star power that gets people into the theater. And that's where things get complicated. Sydney Sweeney was the first person cast. And here's the thing, I don't hate her. I actually think she's really talented. I just personally don't like her as Millie. Millie is a character who spent a decade in prison, and that's not just a backstory. That should live in her body, her behavior, her instinct. This could have been great representation for formerly incarcerated people. But in the film, it's treated like a plot device instead of a character development, which is partly the fault of the script. However, there is a certain grit, a hyper-awareness, a survival instinct that comes from experience. And I didn't feel that from Sydney. If it were me, I would have cast an unknown. Someone without preconceived audience bias, someone who could disappear into the role and grow with the franchise. Because yeah, there are sequels, and they're not great. I've read them, I thought about recapping them, but I was almost done with the third one and would have to reread them, and I couldn't bring myself to do it. Y'all, they're really bad. Like, truly heinous. Anyway, Jasmine and I made a voice note when coming home from the theater so I wouldn't forget my thoughts, and we sum up our thoughts on her acting pretty well here.
And you know what, Sydney Sweeney, I think that she did better than I thought that she would. I think it's also because I see her as kind of like a living humiliation ritual, and so I feel like a lot of the roles that she plays involve her being like a loser, of sorts. And she wasn't a loser in this.
Yeah. Well, I will say at the beginning, I didn't believe her.
I didn't believe her for like the first like half of the movie.
She was so good at the end.
I also think it was because it was kind of like dry and like silly. So it was just, and like when you have such a small cast, like
Everyone has to be on their A game.
Everyone has to be on their A game, and unfortunately, she was outbeat by a child for most of the movie. And the child was barely in the fucking movie.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think that maybe, I don't know, like, if directors, like, just, like, trust Sydney Sweeney or something.
Too much!
She can't, like, take direction. But I'm like, I feel like someone somewhere could have worked with her for this to be better.
Well, because I think she has the bones to be a good actor.
She was in a show. When she was a
Everything
little bit younger,
Sucks.
Everything Sucks. And I didn't even know that was Sydney Sweeney at the time, by the way.
I love her, and I love her as Cassie. There's something there.
See, I think that she plays good at Cassie, but I think she perhaps feels personally about Cassie.
That's what I think. I think
that's why she's very good at it.
And that's what I'll also say with Christy, there are moments in that where I'm like, we're putting on a little song and dance, but for the most part, she feels because she executive produced it. She produced it, and so she has like this, she cares about Christy a lot. I think that's definitely it. And I think because I wanted to see more of Millie's bite at the beginning of the movie, so that could have also been the script, but that's why she's kind of insufferable as a main character, which of course is not a role that Sydney Sweeney should play, because she's already insufferable.
It's kind of double whammy.
I know. People tell me, I've been told by someone in the industry that I look like a more interesting Sydney Sweeney.
And what's actually so crazy is that you don't favor her in any way, shape, or form, except for your hair color.
Now, on the flip side, Amanda Seyfried, perfect, no notes, I love her. The strategy here was really clear. Cast someone A-list whose present feels slightly unexpected right now. Brandon Sklenar as Andrew also really impressed me. In the book, Andrew almost feels like this male manic pixie dream girl until he flips. But Brandon made him feel more like a full, layered human, which actually made him a lot more unsettling. And then there's Enzo. Or not, I guess. Why did they cut him? He's important, especially for future books, yet Michelle Marone was basically non-existent. Okay, let's get into the real issue. And fair warning, I'm about to sound like really unhinged talking about how we could have made the movie a little bit more sinister, but Freida McFadden's books are known for their prologues. In the novel, we open with an unknown narrator telling us that the police are here and that she is going to jail. Then we cut to Millie arriving. The film skips this entirely and instead creates tension by making the house feel ominous from the beginning. I do think it was missed because by making the pull-up to the house so dramatic, this enlists the house as a character. From there, the house evolved into this evil character that aids Andrew as opposed to Andrew being the evil. Although, shout out to the PD team because the house had a handful of these sinister details that hinted about what was happening in the house, and I thought that was actually really cool. I think the movie should have opened with a shot of the house, police officers are walking around, and then it fades out, and then we have the drive up. So that when Millie finds out about Cecilia drowning, the audience might be like, whew, we're in the clear. The cops at the house had to do with her drowning, but actually it has to do with the end of the movie. That would have been a really interesting way to make it circular the way it was in the book. The first big change from the book is the peanut butter. In the book, Millie makes Cecilia a peanut butter sandwich, and Cecilia freaks out, saying she's allergic. Millie throws away the peanut butter and talks to Nina about it, who does confirm this. Later, Millie notices the peanut butter is back in the house when Andrew is making a sandwich. Andrew says that Cecilia is not allergic to peanut butter. I really think it's remiss to not have included the bit about the peanut butter because it did two important things. One, it established connection. I think they were either making a midnight snack or lunch. It was a moment of connection between Andrew and Millie where they kind of both were like, Nina's crazy. Like, what? So then whenever they have the affair in the hotel, you don't just have I think we got 3 scenes where I felt them developing a connection. The scene in the hotel where they have an affair makes more sense. The second thing that the peanut butter does is it establishes Andrew as not the perfect father. So you find out that Andrew would mix the peanut butter into Cece's food to keep Nina in her place. And that's so much more interesting than the juice is a privilege subplot. After the first outburst, because Andrew knows Nina is not crazy and just putting on this act, we could have seen Cecilia on screen with visible hives. That would have been such a sinister detail because in the movie, that would have added a layer to Nina's story. In the movie, it appears that Andrew just loves Cecilia and doesn't harm her in any way. And honestly, mothers will stay in abusive situations like this if the child is cared for financially and emotionally. I think Cecilia's safety adds a layer to the situation beyond Nina just wanting to get out. Which then kind of brings me to Enzo, because his role in the film is almost non-existent. And it's a bigger problem than it seems. In the book, Enzo is the person who helps Nina get out. He's active, he has a purpose, and he's tied to her story in a meaningful way. But the film reduces him to someone who just appears in the background. Jasmine said it exactly right.
All he does is lurk until Amanda Seyfried is like, yeah, he was trying to help me leave. And I'm like, well, maybe I would believe that if I saw anything.
And here's the part that, I genuinely can't get past. In the book, Nina and Enzo sleep together, which is already a strange choice narratively, because he's like, oh my god, you're like a sister to me. And then when she leaves her husband, she's like, yeah, you right now. And he's like, me? Oh wow, you're like a sister, but okay. But then it also doesn't make sense because, spoiler, Enzo and Millie get married. So now retroactively, that moment doesn't add any complexity, it just muddies this relationship. It doesn't deepen Nina's character, it doesn't meaningfully impact Enzo's arc, and it creates unnecessary tension in this one book. And honestly, I think the film was correct to remove it, but in doing that, they removed everything else that made Enzo important. So instead of fixing the problem, they erased the character. My next biggest pet peeve in movies is voiceovers. I hate them so much, I think they're cheap and uninteresting. And Nina reading the letter that she wrote to Cece just didn't work for me because there were no stakes in her reading it to the audience, just explanation. I think what they should have done is keep the letter reading in the same spot, right? However, instead of it being, oh, she took Cece out to dinner and then she wrote this letter to give her when she's older. I think what they should have done is have her tell the story to Cece about tell the exact same thing that's in the letter, but have her just tell it to Cece, because then there are stakes. There's a kid who's old enough to know that something sinister has been happening in the house, but doesn't quite understand what's going on. And I think cutting between the flashbacks and then Cece's reactions and Nina's reaction, I think that could have been really powerful. There are stakes in her telling her daughter the truth. There's emotion, and we're cutting between past and present with a purpose. Additionally, they should have worked to show more of the backstory in earlier as opposed to in the letter info dump. I mean, that's how it's set up in the book, is just kind of this info dump in part 2, which is Nina's part. It felt clunky in the book. I didn't think it worked very well in the book, and then it certainly didn't work in the movie. Also, the flashbacks? Why do they look exactly the same 10 years later? It's really okay to let women age on screen. Newsflash, men are allowed to, why can't women? Also, Millie's punishment in the film makes no sense. If Andrew is obsessed with perfection, why would he have her permanently scar herself? They kept the same incident that gets Millie her first punishment, right? So she broke that plate. In the movie, he had her permanently scar herself 27 times for the 27 shards. It doesn't make any sense. Why would he have her? He's obsessed with perfection. Why would he have her scar herself permanently? In the books, Millie has to lay flat and balance books on herself for 3 hours to learn balance. Then she was counting in her head, so she was counting too fast and gets up before the 3 hours are over and has to start again. I know that they probably did the cutting because that's more visually interesting to the audience in their minds, but I think seeing the physical strain that was on her body is visibly interesting to the audience. And finally, that ending. The movie makes it more action heavy, but the book ending, oh my gosh, way more satisfying. But in the book, Millie locks him in the closet. They do the whole switcheroo like in the movie, but then Millie makes him pull out all his teeth and leaves him there for a week, and he dies of starvation. And then Nina comes back and opens the door to him dead, and then Millie's just behind her and goes, oops, left him for too long. And then Nina and Millie decide together that they're gonna say it's an accident. They have to purposely come together and cover up his death. That is a shared decision which bonds them. And the movie loses that and makes it an accident. At the end of the day, I don't think The Housemaid failed as an experience. I had fun watching it. The audience was engaged, people were reacting, and it worked on that level. But where it falls short is in what it chooses to say. This is a story that centers on a formerly incarcerated woman and a woman in an abusive marriage. Two experiences that carry real weight, complexity, and specificity. and the film touches on those ideas without fully exploring them. Millie's past becomes a plot device instead of something that shapes her behavior and identity. Nina's situation is framed more as a twist than a lived reality. So while the film is entertaining, it doesn't provide much meaning when it comes to the people that it's representing. And I feel like that's a missed opportunity. I did feel that way too about the book as well. I think I'm being really harsh about representation because my philosophy, because I want to make book to movie adaptations, is that we should always be improving upon the material. So if you have this book, which I love the book, I thought it was fun, I love, like, the twist was interesting, and we could have made there be more complexity and given true representation to the two women in this situation. Adaptations don't just translate stories, they reinterpret them. And what you choose to emphasize matters. Well, if you've seen the film or read the book, I'd be really interested to know what you thought. And if you like deep dives like this into acting, casting, why movies work or don't, make sure you subscribe because I'm going to be breaking down a lot more adaptations. I'll see you in the next one.